The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan glittered under crystal chandeliers, their light refracting off champagne flutes and diamond jewelry. Barbara Chen stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Park Avenue, her emerald gown hugging her slender frame perfectly. At 28, she had become accustomed to these gatherings, the charity galas, the corporate dinners, the endless parade of New York's elite. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air she couldn't quite name, something that made her grip her glass tighter than necessary. Daniel Morrison moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his tailored Armani suit fitting his athletic build impeccably. At 35, he had built a tech empire worth over $200 million, and everyone in this room either wanted something from him or wanted to be him. Barbara watched as he shook hands with a city councilman, his perfect smile never faltering. She had fallen in love with that smile 3 years ago at a similar event. Back then, she had been a graduate student in architecture, waitressing at these parties to pay her tuition. He had noticed her, pursued her, swept her into a world of luxury she had only glimpsed from the outside. "Barbara, darling." Margaret Morrison appeared at her elbow, Daniel's mother, dressed in Chanel and wearing enough pearls to fund a small country. "You look absolutely radiant tonight. That dress is stunning on you." "Thank you, Margaret," Barbara replied, forcing warmth into her voice. The older woman had never quite approved of her son's choice, though she masked it well beneath layers of Upper East Side politeness. "Daniel tells me you've been working on some personal projects lately," Margaret continued, her grey eyes sharp and assessing. "I do hope you're not neglecting the foundation work. The Children's Hospital benefit is only 2 months away, and we need someone reliable to handle the arrangements." Before Barbara could respond, Daniel materialized beside them, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back. "Mother, I'm sure Barbara has everything under control. She always does." His fingers pressed slightly too hard against her spine, a warning she had learned to recognize. The evening progressed through its predictable rhythms: speeches about charitable causes, silent auction announcements, the carefully choreographed social dance of Manhattan's wealthiest. Barbara moved through it mechanically, her mind elsewhere. 3 weeks ago, she had discovered something that had shattered her carefully constructed world: a manila envelope, tucked away in Daniel's home office, containing documents she was never meant to see. Documents about a decision made 5 years ago, before they had even met, but one that connected to her in ways that made her stomach turn. At dinner, they sat at the head table with other tech moguls and their partners. Daniel's hand rested on her thigh beneath the tablecloth, squeezing occasionally as he laughed at someone's joke or closed a business deal between courses of Chilean sea bass and dry-aged beef. To everyone watching, they were the perfect couple. Beautiful, successful, enviably in love. So Barbara, Richard Chen, an investment banker who shared her last name but no relation, leaned across the table. "Daniel mentioned you're originally from California. What brought you to New York?" "Columbia," she answered. "I came for graduate school and ended up staying." "And lucky for me she did," Daniel interjected smoothly, raising his glass. "To fortunate encounters and beautiful architecture." The table laughed and raised their glasses in return. Barbara drank deeply, wishing the wine could wash away the knowledge that was eating her alive from the inside. She had spent 3 weeks wrestling with what to do. Confronting Daniel directly seemed impossible. He controlled everything in their relationship, from where they lived to who they socialized with. His generosity had always come with invisible strings, she realized now, strings she hadn't noticed until they began to tighten. After dinner, the dancing began. Daniel led her to the floor, his arms encircling her waist, as a string quartet played something classical and romantic. Up close, she could smell his cologne, Tom Ford, expensive and familiar. "You've been quiet tonight," he murmured against her ear. "Something bothering you?" Her heart hammered. "Just tired. It's been a long week." His arms tightened. "You know how important these events are for my business. I need you present, engaged. People notice when you're distant." "I'm doing my best, Daniel." "Are you?" His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge she had learned to fear. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you'd rather be anywhere else." "That's not true." "Don't lie to me, Barbara." His fingers dug into her waist, hard enough to leave marks beneath the silk. "I've given you everything. The least you can do is show some appreciation." She pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. "We need to talk about something I found." His expression froze, the mask of affability slipping for just a second. "What did you find?" "Not here. Later, when we're home." The music swelled around them, but the space between their bodies felt arctic. Daniel's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath his perfectly smooth skin. "You went through my things. I was looking for the contractor's invoice you said was in your office. The drawer was unlocked. And you took it upon yourself to read private documents." His voice remained low, but fury radiated from every word. "Daniel, if those documents say what I think they say..." His hand shot up and connected with her cheek in a sharp, echoing crack that stopped the music mid-phrase. The ballroom fell into shocked silence. Barbara staggered backward, her hand flying to her face, feeling the heat bloom across her skin. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward them, witnessing the moment the perfect facade shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The silence lasted only seconds before chaos erupted. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by urgent whispers. Margaret Morrison's face went white, then red. Security guards moved toward the dance floor with practiced efficiency, but Barbara barely registered any of it. She stood frozen, her ears ringing, her cheek throbbing, staring at the man she thought she knew. Daniel's expression cycled through shock, rage, and then something calculating. He reached for her. "Barbara, don't touch me." Her voice came out steady, surprisingly strong. She took another step back, nearly colliding with Richard Chen, who had rushed forward. "Are you all right?" Richard asked, his voice tight with concern. "Should I call the police?" "I'm fine," she heard herself say, though nothing was fine. Everything was crumbling, the life she had built dissolving like sugar in water. "Barbara, let's go somewhere private and discuss this calmly," Daniel said, his public persona sliding back into place. He smiled at the onlookers, that charming smile that had won over investors and board members, and her, once upon a time. "Just a misunderstanding, everyone. Please, continue enjoying your evening." But no one moved to resume the party. The moment hung suspended, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. "No," Barbara said clearly. "I'm leaving." She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt surreal, as if she were watching herself from outside her body. Behind her she heard Margaret's sharp voice berating Daniel in hushed tones, heard the murmur of conversation resuming, heard footsteps following her. "Wait!" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Barbara paused near the coat check, turning to find a petite blonde in a navy dress hurrying after her. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to intrude. I'm Jennifer Walsh. I'm an attorney." Barbara stared at her, confused. "I don't need..." "You might." Jennifer glanced back toward the ballroom. "What just happened in there with all those witnesses? That's assault. And given Daniel Morrison's public profile, this is going to explode in the media within hours." She pressed a business card into Barbara's hand. "You're going to need legal representation. Call me anytime, day or night." Before Barbara could respond, Jennifer disappeared back into the ballroom. Barbara looked down at the card. Walsh and Associates, family law and personal injury. Her hand was shaking, she realized. Her whole body was shaking. The coat check attendant, a young man who had watched the entire scene, retrieved her wrap without being asked, his eyes full of sympathy. "Miss, are you sure you're okay? Do you want me to call you a cab?" "Yes, please, thank you." Outside, the October air was crisp and cold, carrying the smell of hot dogs and exhaust fumes that was quintessentially Manhattan. Barbara wrapped her shawl tighter, waiting for the cab, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed insistently, texts from Daniel, from Margaret, from numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it off. The cab ride to her friend Rachel's apartment in Brooklyn passed in a blur. She and Rachel had been roommates at Columbia, before Daniel, before everything changed. They had drifted apart over the past year. Another thing she realized now was Daniel's doing, his subtle ways of isolating her from anyone who might question their relationship. Rachel answered the door in pajamas, her curly hair piled on top of her head, confusion giving way to alarm when she saw Barbara's face. "Oh my God, what happened? Can I stay here tonight?" "Of course, get in here." Rachel pulled her inside, guiding her to the worn couch that Barbara had helped pick out 5 years ago, back when they were both poor students splitting rent on a fourth-floor walk-up. "Tell me everything." And Barbara did. She told Rachel about finding the documents 3 weeks ago, papers showing that Daniel had been involved in a real estate development deal 5 years prior, one that had displaced dozens of families in Queens. Among those families had been the Chens, no relation to Barbara, but the coincidence didn't end there. The development had been built on the site where Barbara's uncle's restaurant had stood, the restaurant where her uncle had died in a suspicious fire that was ruled accidental but had bankrupted her aunt and cousins. "Wait," Rachel interrupted. "You think Daniel was involved in your uncle's death?" "I don't know. The timeline matches. The company that bought the building, that started the fire investigation, that cleared everyone of wrongdoing. Daniel was a major investor. He would have been only 30, just starting out, but the documents show he stood to gain millions if that block was cleared for development." Rachel's face had gone pale. "And he knew about your uncle? About your family's connection?" "That's what I was going to ask him tonight. But Rachel, here's the thing that really scares me. I think he knew who I was before he ever approached me at that gala 3 years ago. I think this entire relationship has been about keeping me close, keeping me from ever looking into what really happened." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and poisonous. Rachel reached for her hand, squeezing tight. "Barbara, this is serious. If what you're saying is true—" "I know. I sound paranoid. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm connecting dots that don't connect. Or maybe you're finally seeing clearly." Rachel stood, pacing. "Okay, we need to think strategically. That lawyer who gave you her card, call her tomorrow, first thing, and we need to document everything. Your face right now. We should photograph it." Barbara touched her cheek, which had swollen slightly. The physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal, the realization that the past 3 years might have been built on lies and manipulation. They spent the rest of the night cataloging everything Barbara could remember about the documents, about Daniel's behavior, about the small red flags she had ignored or rationalized away, how he had been so interested in her family history when they first met, how he had encouraged her to move on from her grief about her uncle, to stop dwelling on the past, how he had subtly steered her away from pursuing certain architectural projects in Queens, particularly anything involving reconstruction or historical preservation in that neighborhood. By dawn, they had filled 6 pages with notes. Barbara felt exhausted but clear-headed for the first time in weeks. Outside Rachel's window, Brooklyn was waking up, coffee shops opening, subway trains rumbling past, the ordinary rhythms of life that continued regardless of personal catastrophes. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked, pouring them both coffee. Barbara looked at her friend, at the city beyond the window, at the business card still clutched in her hand. "I'm going to find out the truth, and then I'm going to make him pay for what he did." Jennifer Walsh's office was in Midtown, a modest suite on the 20th floor of a building that had seen better decades. Barbara sat in the small waiting room, her sunglasses hiding the fading bruise on her cheek, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had called at 8 in the morning, and Jennifer had cleared her schedule to see her at 10. "Thank you for coming," Jennifer said, ushering her into a cramped office filled with law books and case files. "I've been following the news. The video from the gala is everywhere." Barbara's stomach dropped. "Video? Someone filmed it on their phone. It went viral overnight. Daniel Morrison's PR team is working overtime, but the damage is done. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing." Barbara removed her sunglasses, letting Jennifer see the full extent of the bruising. Jennifer's expression hardened. "We can file assault charges today if you want. With that video as evidence, it's an open and shut case." "I want that, but I also want to investigate something else." Barbara pulled out her phone, showing Jennifer the photos she had taken of Daniel's documents before leaving his apartment that final time. "I think he's connected to a crime that happened 5 years ago, a fire that killed my uncle." For the next 2 hours, Barbara laid out everything: the real estate development, the timeline, the suspicious circumstances of the fire, Daniel's interest in her family history. Jennifer listened without interrupting, taking meticulous notes. "This is complicated," Jennifer finally said. "The assault case is straightforward, but proving Daniel's involvement in a 5-year-old arson case, especially one that was already investigated and closed, that's going to be difficult and expensive." "I have to try." Jennifer studied her for a long moment. "Okay, I have a colleague, former NYPD detective, who now works as a private investigator. His name is Marcus Rivera. If there's anything to find, he'll find it. But Barbara, I need you to understand, going after someone like Daniel Morrison with his resources and connections, this is going to get ugly. He'll come at you with everything he has. He already hit me in front of 300 people." Barbara said quietly. "How much uglier can it get?" The answer came later that afternoon. Barbara's phone, which she had finally turned back on, exploded with notifications. Daniel's legal team had released a statement claiming Barbara had been unstable for months, that she had substance abuse issues, that the incident at the gala was the culmination of ongoing mental health struggles. They expressed Daniel's deep concern for her well-being and his hope that she would seek the help she needed. "They're trying to discredit you," Rachel said, reading the statement over Barbara's shoulder. Classic abuser playbook. But public opinion, for once, wasn't buying it. The video was too clear, too damning. Social media rallied around Barbara, sharing stories of their own experiences with domestic violence, praising her for walking away. Several major news outlets requested interviews. 3 different women's advocacy groups offered their support. Marcus Rivera turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 50s, with grey threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He met with Barbara and Jennifer at the law office 3 days after the gala. "I've already started preliminary research," he said, spreading files across Jennifer's desk. "The fire at your uncle's restaurant in 2020. Official ruling was faulty wiring, but there were inconsistencies in the investigation. The building inspector who signed off on the electrical work 6 months before the fire. He was fired 2 years later for taking bribes from developers. He's currently serving time for corruption." Barbara leaned forward. "Can we talk to him?" "I already did. He's willing to cooperate in exchange for consideration on his sentence. He says Daniel Morrison's company paid him $10,000 to approve electrical work that was never actually done. They wanted the building to fail inspection eventually, to force the tenants out, but your uncle was stubborn. Wouldn't sell, wouldn't leave, so they needed a faster solution." The room went silent. Barbara felt cold all over, despite the heating running in the office. "He had my uncle killed for a real estate deal." "We can't prove that yet," Marcus cautioned, "but we can prove fraud, bribery, and possibly negligent homicide. If we can connect Daniel directly to the payments, if we can find communications showing he knew about the faulty electrical work, we have a case." "What do you need from me?" Barbara asked. "Everything you remember about Daniel's office, his computer security, his routines, any access you might still have to his properties or accounts." Barbara thought carefully. "I still have keys to his penthouse. He hasn't asked for them back yet." Jennifer shook her head immediately. "Absolutely not. We can't use illegally obtained evidence. It would torpedo the entire case." "But if someone noticed something suspicious and called it in," Marcus said slowly, "and police obtained a warrant based on that tip, that would be different." They looked at each other, the implications hanging in the air. "I can't advise this," Jennifer said firmly. "As your attorney, I'm telling you that breaking into his apartment is illegal and dangerous." "Understood," Barbara said. "But hypothetically, if someone were concerned about Daniel's mental state after the gala and went to check on him and happened to see something concerning through a window or in plain sight?" Marcus pulled out a small device that looked like a USB drive. "This is a data cloner. If it were plugged into a computer, it would copy the entire hard drive in about 15 minutes. Hypothetically." Barbara took the device, turning it over in her hands. 3 years of her life had been a lie. Her uncle had died for Daniel's greed, and now she had a chance to expose him, to get justice even if it meant taking a risk. "When should I visit?" she asked quietly. "Tonight," Marcus said. "He's giving a press conference at his office at 8. It's been publicized everywhere. He'll definitely be out of the apartment." The penthouse looked exactly as Barbara remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, art on the walls that belonged in museums. She stood in the foyer, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. The doorman had barely questioned her presence. She had lived here, on and off, for 2 years. She belonged here, or so everyone assumed. The home office was down the hall, past the master bedroom where she had slept beside Daniel countless nights. Unknowing, she forced herself not to think about that, to focus on the task at hand. The office door was locked, but she had the key. Inside, everything was pristine, organized, exactly as Daniel liked it. His computer sat on the desk, password protected. But Barbara knew the password, his mother's birthday. She had watched him type it 100 times. The screen came to life, showing his desktop wallpaper, a photo of them together in the Hamptons last summer. She looked happy in that photo. She remembered being happy. The USB drive felt heavy in her hand. This was the line, once crossed, that she couldn't uncross. If she was caught, if this went wrong, she would be the criminal, not Daniel. But her uncle's face swam in her memory. Uncle Richard, who had taught her to draw when she was 5, who had given her a job at his restaurant when she needed money for textbooks, who had believed in her dreams of becoming an architect. He had died alone, trapped in a burning building while Daniel Morrison had profited from his death. She plugged in the drive. The software ran automatically, a progress bar inching across the screen. 15 minutes, Marcus had said. Barbara watched it climb, 10%, 20%, while checking her phone constantly. The press conference was still ongoing. She could see it streaming live. Daniel stood at a podium, looking somber and sincere, talking about his commitment to addressing mental health issues and supporting his loved ones through difficult times. 50%, 60%. Barbara moved around the office, looking for anything else useful. The file cabinet where she had originally found the documents about the real estate deal, she photographed everything inside with her phone. Bank statements, correspondence with contractors, payment records to shell companies. 80%. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Police scanner just mentioned a 911 call at Daniel's address. Get out now. Barbara's blood turned to ice. She looked at the computer. 92%. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder. 95%. The elevator would take too long. There was a service stairwell, but that was 37 flights down. 98%. The sirens were right outside the building now. 100%. She yanked the USB drive out, shut down the computer, ran. The service stairwell was cold and echoing, her heels clattering on concrete. She kicked them off, running barefoot, down and down and down, her breath coming in gasps. Behind her, above her, she heard the elevator arriving, heard voices. She burst out into the service entrance on the ground floor, right into Marcus Rivera's arms. He steadied her, then pushed her toward a waiting car. Get in, get down, don't move. Jennifer was driving. They pulled out of the service alley just as police cars arrived at the main entrance, lights flashing. Barbara stayed low in the back seat, clutching the USB drive, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. How did you know? She gasped. The doorman, Marcus said grimly. Daniel's been paying him to report on your movements. He called it in as soon as you went up. But he's lazy. Took him 20 minutes to actually make the call, and we've been monitoring Daniel's security frequencies. They drove to Jennifer's office, took the copied data to Marcus's tech specialist, a brilliant woman named Amy who worked out of a basement in Queens. By midnight, they had everything. Emails between Daniel and the corrupt building inspector, payment records that traced back to Daniel's personal accounts, communications with the arson investigator who had ruled the fire accidental, showing that investigator had also been paid off. This is enough, Jennifer said, her eyes bright. This is more than enough. We take this to the district attorney tomorrow. But Barbara was staring at one particular email, dated 6 months before she had met Daniel. It was from his assistant to a private investigator, requesting a full background check on Barbara Chen, including family history, financial records, and psychological profile. He hunted me, she whispered. He found out about my connection to Uncle Richard, and he hunted me. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. He wanted to control the narrative, keep you close, keep you from asking questions. But he underestimated you. The next morning, accompanied by Jennifer, and with Marcus's full report, Barbara met with the district attorney. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the afternoon, arrest warrants had been issued for Daniel Morrison and 3 associates on charges of fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and negligent homicide. The arrest happened during Daniel's scheduled appearance on a major morning show, where he was supposed to discuss his new mental health initiative. Federal agents walked onto the set mid-interview. The video went even more viral than the gala footage. The trial took 8 months. Barbara testified for 2 days, walking the jury through everything: the documents, the timeline, Daniel's controlling behavior, the assault at the gala. The prosecution brought in the corrupt building inspector, the paid-off arson investigator, financial experts who traced the money, and the family members of other people displaced by Daniel's development schemes. Daniel's defense tried to paint Barbara as a vengeful ex-girlfriend, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Standing outside the courthouse after sentencing, 15 years, no possibility of parole for 10, Barbara felt Rachel squeeze her hand. Jennifer stood on her other side, Marcus just behind them. The press shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Barbara had already given her statement inside. "Where will you go now?" Jennifer asked quietly. Barbara looked up at the grey New York sky, feeling the October wind on her face. Nearly a year exactly since that night at the gala. She thought about her uncle, about justice delayed but not denied, about the woman she had been and the woman she had become. "Forward," she said simply. "I'm going forward." She had started working again, taking on pro bono architectural projects for community organizations in Queens, redesigning spaces for the very people Daniel's development had tried to erase. She had reconnected with her aunt and cousins, begun rebuilding those relationships. She had learned to sleep without nightmares, to trust her instincts, to recognize her own strength. The settlement from the civil suit against Daniel's estate had been substantial. Barbara donated most of it to causes supporting domestic violence survivors and wrongly displaced families. She kept enough to open a small architecture firm focused on affordable housing, hiring Rachel as her business manager. 6 months after the trial concluded, Barbara stood in Queens at the groundbreaking ceremony for a new community center, built on the site where her uncle's restaurant had once stood. They had named it the Richard Chen Community Center. Her aunt wept as they turned the first shovel of earth. "He would be so proud of you," her aunt said, embracing her. Barbara looked around at the crowd gathered, former neighbors who had been displaced, community leaders, the families of other victims, Jennifer and Marcus and Rachel and Amy, all the people who had helped her transform trauma into purpose, pain into progress. "I hope so," Barbara said. "I really hope so." The center opened the following spring, its glass and steel architecture reflecting both past and future, grief and hope intertwined. Barbara had designed it herself, pouring everything she had learned about loss and resilience into every line and angle. It housed resources for domestic violence survivors, legal aid services, job training programs, and a small museum documenting the neighborhood's history. On opening day, standing in the main hall with sunlight streaming through the windows she had designed, Barbara finally felt something that had eluded her for so long: peace. The past couldn't be changed, but it could be honored. Justice couldn't restore what was lost, but it could prevent future losses. And she, despite everything, was still standing, still building, still believing in a future worth creating. That evening, as visitors filtered out and staff cleaned up from the celebration, Barbara sat alone in the small garden they had planted in the center's courtyard. Rachel found her there, sitting on a bench beneath a young oak tree, Uncle Richard's favorite tree. "You did it," Rachel said, sitting beside her. "You actually did it." "We did it," Barbara corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." They sat together as the sun set over Queens, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, the endless soundtrack of New York City. But here, in this moment, in this place built from ashes and determination, there was quiet, there was hope, there was home. Barbara thought about the woman she had been at that gala, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, blind to the bars until they nearly crushed her. She thought about the moment that had shattered everything, the shock, the pain, the public humiliation that had seemed like the end of the world. But it hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning, the catalyst that had forced her to see clearly, to fight back, to reclaim not just her own life but her uncle's memory, and the truth that had been buried beneath lies and money and power. "Do you regret any of it?" Rachel asked. "Even the parts with Daniel before you knew?" Barbara considered the question seriously. "I regret not seeing sooner. I regret the time wasted, but I don't regret the person it made me become. Surviving him, exposing him, building all this, it showed me what I'm capable of, and that's worth something." The sky darkened fully, stars appearing one by one above the city lights. Inside the community center, the lights stayed on, a beacon of hope and justice in a neighborhood that had been pushed down but never broken. Barbara stood, brushing off her dress, ready to lock up and head home to the small apartment she shared with Rachel in Brooklyn, the life she had rebuilt from nothing into something true and meaningful, and entirely her own. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more families to help, more buildings to design, more stories to tell about resilience and recovery. But tonight, she allowed herself this moment of stillness, of reflection, of gratitude for the strength she had discovered within herself and the community that had embraced her. The perfect facade had shattered that night at the gala, but what had emerged from the wreckage was something far more valuable: the truth, and a woman who had learned that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are the ones that finally set us free.